question being, and we're going to go to you for this first, Brian, and then to Eric. Do you anticipate the proxy advisors will recommend against say on pay at a higher rate next year?
That's a great question, Sal. It's one that's, while impossible to know, I think it really depends on not only everything we talked about today around disclosure, it also depends on the actions that companies and compensation committees are going to take as we near the end of the year. I think for companies that are more aggressive on payouts and changes being made, adjustments being made, for example, going from a below target annual incentive to above, I think there will be a preponderance of against recommendations. For those that are working within their means of the compensation programs, I think the proxy advisors are going to recognize that this is a pandemic.
Eric, what about you? Do you anticipate proxy advisors will recommend against say on pay at a higher rate next year?
Yeah, I think it'll generally track. I think like Brian said, it really will come down to how aggressive the actions companies are taking. And then I do think for the companies that are taking smaller actions, they will have the opportunity this year more than any other year for a discretionary bonus, any kind of action like that, to have an explanation and rationale for it. And that will be considered more than in past years, and therefore it might offset some of those. But like Brian said, for the companies that are at the more extreme on that spectrum in terms of, adjusting any LTI awards, I do think that, there will be some negative recommendations from ISS. And I think Brian did share some interesting data that so far for the companies that are kind of early filers, it seems like it's more or less balancing out those two ends of the spectrum, and that it's generally tracking with past years, but it will be interesting to see how companies wrap up this fiscal year and what decisions they make then.